Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in a couple of minutes. So you can just take the time to get settled in your space. We'll be mostly on our back tonight. And we'll actually need like a decent amount of space towards the end of the lesson. So if you use like a small corridor in your room, maybe between like a bed and a wall, if that's all you have, that's all you have. But if you have any way of just creating a little bit more width than say a yoga mat, then you'll be pleased that you did. So as you're getting set up, you won't need to see me, as we would just see my face. You'll just need to make sure that you can hear me well. And it's wonderful if I can see you, but if you want to keep your camera off, or if it doesn't work for you to have a good view, that's fine. All right, I'm going to get started. So you can just start to get your space ready if you haven't already. For those of you that are perhaps a little bit newer to Feldenkrais, something like a carpeted floor or a rug will work perfectly. We'll mostly be lying on our back today. If you have a yoga mat, that can work as well. Sometimes the friction or the stickiness actually gets in the way. So you can feel that out during the lesson. That's what you're using. So tonight, I'm going to just talk a little bit about the series, the themes we'll be studying for the 10 weeks. Then we'll go through about a 60-minute Feldenkrais Awareness Through Movement lesson. And then I'll leave the meeting up at the end for some reflections about the lesson. And then if there are any kind of nuts and bolts questions about the series, if anybody is interested in that. So a little bit about this series. So in the next few months of classes, we're going to be studying the art and the science of strength and the physics of our own moving body and how it feels. And of course, we do this all within the laboratory of our own selves. And we'll generally be emphasizing the art of the moving body, but it can also be helpful to understand some of the physics too. I don't pretend to be a physics expert, so there'll be a little bit of physics. But it can be really common within a Feldenkrais lesson that a movement becomes much easier. Or at the end of the lesson, some part of the body feels lighter or more free to move. And it can be this very lovely feeling, almost as though things are effortless. And so our intelligent, analytical adult minds really like to understand how it could be that the sense of the weight of a limb or the weight of your head could be perceived as being really heavy at the beginning of the lesson and then change and be perceived as being much lighter at the end of the lesson, because we know that you don't change weight within that hour. So this change in perception that happens is because of the change in our self-organization, how we're using our whole body in a more intelligent way. So we'll spend a little bit of time kind of taking that apart within the lessons, playing with how we relate to the floor. The floor provides us with so much information, so we'll always be working with the floor. And so this idea of sort of feeling freedom or effortlessness, in general, we don't have that much of a sense of our own weight when we are moving. So if you picture a moment in your life when you felt very free, maybe a physical activity or dancing or some sport that you feel very fluent at. And you had a moment where you were just in this peak state. This memory that you might be starting to think of is often accompanied with the sense of freedom and weightlessness. It's not usually that there's a sense of working really hard or pressing or struggling to be strong in some athletic or artistic performance. And if you don't have a personal memory or experience that you're thinking of, you can think of any athlete or artist that you really enjoy watching. And there tends to be an effortlessness in what they're doing. Particularly, you find that with the most virtuosic athletes, artists, musicians. As you're watching them, it just seems so silky smooth what they're doing. An example, I grew up watching Michael Jordan, and a few years ago, there was a documentary about the rise of his career. So I remember watching him as a kid, and then I was watching this documentary, and it was my experience both times that I was watching this athlete that was so much better than everyone else, and somehow he made it look so easy, so effortless. So that's what we're going for. All of our lessons in Feldenkrais are really pointing in that direction, that there's this ability to move ourselves really powerfully without perceiving our weight or the struggle of doing that. And so we'll make it really specific in this class. Sometimes we'll be moving in a very subtle and small way in order to clarify the coordination and the origin of a movement. And then these subtle moments of listening will then inform these more athletic moments in the lesson. So within this practice of listening, you'll notice that there's this whole cascade of events in the body that takes place in order for any movement to happen. A whole series of internal decisions that normally we're not paying attention to. And we can't pay attention to all of those minute little movements because we have other things that we're thinking about. So, but tonight we will begin to listen to that. So if I'm kind of like speaking a different language to you right now, it's okay. Words are not very well in describing this, as well as really experiencing the lesson is. So yeah, that's what we'll play with today. That's what we're going to do right now, is feeling how things might be able to be done with less effort. Okay, so I'm going to have you lie on your back. And so you're just coming to rest with the floor for a moment. Your legs can be long if that's comfortable. If it's accessible for you to close your eyes, you can do that. And listening to your breath as it comes and goes. And try not to breathe in any way that you've been taught or in some way that you think you should breathe, but simply being in the state of listening to the air as it comes over your lip or up through the nostrils. It passes over the hard palate, the hard bones at the top of the mouth, back, towards the throat. You can sense the area around your nostrils, the change of the contraction around your nose. And you just have this sense that your diaphragm begins to change its position. It shifts your ribs. Some of the muscles in your upper chest may lift a little bit. And the combination of all of these movements changes the internal space in your torso. Your torso internally expands. It creates a little bit of a vacuum and your breath just drops in. It just flows in. And there's nothing you have to do to make it happen. So quietly listening to your breath coming and going as it simply spills in. And listening very carefully as you inhale, which side of your ribs seem to participate with the floor? This interaction with the floor, it presents us with information, and we can actually move our attention from one point to the next. And you can think of a baby, an infant. It's really what they have to explore, this relationship with the floor. So sense for yourself, which side of your ribs seem to become more involved as you exhale and inhale. And could you think of breathing once into the right side, sensing your ribs on the right side, expanding and contracting? Feeling what that's like on the right side. And then breathe into the other side. The idea that you could expand and contract the left side. And the two sides most likely do feel some difference. And there's usually something within us that then wants to make them symmetric, or wants to do it evenly, wants to somehow perfect this image or create symmetry for ourselves. If we shift into that thinking that we want the two sides to be equal, we've kind of missed the participation of experiencing ourselves in the lesson. So just by listening, it will change. Just continue to listen. Not letting any kind of desire to change get in the way of being with and learning about yourself. And that's really to take into the rest of the lesson. And as you continue to be very curious about your breath here, just sensing the length of your torso, the width of your torso, the support that the ground gives the two sides of the ribs. And you can send your attention a little further down into your lower back and feel, does the floor support the lower back? Is the lower back a little lifted from the floor? Is there a little bit more pressure on one side of your back than the other? And noticing the sense of your pelvis, your legs, all the way down to the soles of the feet, the way that your heels contact the ground. And then as you're lying here, cultivate this image of yourself resting on your back as if you are the tiniest child, a small infant. Long before you could think, long before you could talk, long before you could even sit. You spent time on your back, you spent time on your belly. And from that image, we can easily find this sense that we don't have to try. We don't have to try because we are kind of lacking the willpower as a baby, profoundly weak muscularly. So as much as that feels safe in your imagination, picturing a baby that you are here on your back, and then take a moment to bend your knees and stand your feet so that your feet are about hips distance or so. And just notice how bringing your feet to stand changes the relationship of your lower back and your ribs to the floor. How has the contact with the floor changed? Does the floor support your lower back differently? You can even notice if having the feet standing makes a difference to the quality of your breath. And sensing this connection with the floor, letting the breath be ongoing, could you begin to think, which foot could you start to lighten from the floor? Just think of it. Think of, maybe your attention goes to a specific foot. Think, which foot would be easier to start to depart from the floor? So first you choose in your perception before you really act very much. And very gradually, having chosen this one leg, this one foot, could you start to lighten it? It doesn't mean that it actually leaves the ground. So your knees are bent, your feet are standing. And you think of removing maybe half of the weight of the sole of this foot from the ground. So you perceive yourself drawing the foot a little bit away from the floor, and then you let it settle back into the floor and pause and check on your breath. And so still with this one leg in mind, this one foot in mind that you've chosen, you quietly begin to unweight it. Again, not lifting the foot all the way from the floor, just lightening the weight of the foot on the floor, lightening it, bringing it back, and you go on breathing. You continue with this attitude of a baby who doesn't want to try hard and lacks the strength anyways. And see if you can do it without perceiving too much effort from your hip flexors. And everybody pause for a moment. With that leg that you've been working with, let the foot settle, feel the support of the floor, and just drift that knee a little inward, a little outward. And let the hip move a little bit. So you're just guiding that knee a little bit from side to side, just looking for an ease in the hip flexor. And then let that drifting of the knee get quieter until the foot is settled, the knee is settled. And again, with this foot, without interfering with your breath at all, could you just do the very beginning of lightening that foot? As if you're going to bring your knee over your chest, but you don't succeed yet. You don't actually get the foot off the ground. You might feel that the bones of the foot start to disengage, but the tissue of the foot remains on the ground. And so as you do this, gently repeating it, notice, what do you do in your lower back before there's that full lift of your foot off the floor? What happens with the weight behind your hip joint? So you're perceiving how the weight changes itself. As you start to take a little bit of weight off of your foot, where is it going? Does it go into the hip? Does it go somewhere else? And you start to feel how your body can find a way of supporting this foot, of making the foot lighter and lighter. So you can turn your attention to the idea that your interaction with the floor in your hip or your low back, somewhere in your torso, aids in the lifting of the foot. So you could think, could I make this leg lighter by using the floor a little bit better the next time? And you can experiment if you're starting to play, okay, what if I do take the whole foot off the floor? Is there one side of your ribs that wants to help and press the ground, or your lower back? Or is it only in your hip? So each time you experiment with the ground, do something a little different each time, just to test, did the foot get lighter or heavier? All right, then when you're ready, let it go. Just lengthen your legs, give that up for a moment. And as you take your legs long, just see if you haven't already influenced your sense of the two sides of the body. Feel how the two legs are supported by the ground when they're long. Sense how the two legs connect to the rest of yourself. And then when you feel somewhat refreshed, one by one, bend your knees and stand your feet. And feel for yourself. First, just think of trying this with the other leg. So this is the one that you maybe thought wasn't as available. So very curiously, start to study. How could you make this foot light enough that maybe 20% of the weight could leave the floor? Definitely at first, it's not a lifting of the entire foot from the floor, but it's like you pull the bones away from the floor, but the tissue of the foot doesn't depart the mat. You almost have this sense of drawing the foot away from the floor. When you do that, it might feel like your thigh is kind of drawn into yourself at the hip. And so you're lightening the foot and then you're settling it back down. Feeling how you can use the support behind you to make the foot a little bit lighter. And how do you feel the lower back changes as you begin to unweight the foot? If the lower back feels like it's working too hard, unpleasantly arched, can you shift that? Because that may be happening as you start to unweight the foot. You might feel like the lower back arches a lot. That could be for some of you, the experience. Sense what you can do with your breath. So your breath is not impeded. When you start to unweight the foot, and you can start to play with actually lifting the weight of the foot off the floor, bringing the knee a little bit towards your chest, could you let the torso and the spine stay long? So if the perception of the leg is becoming lighter, eventually lifting that foot from the ground. But there's no need to perform that because I mentioned it, right? So it's really experimentation time here. It's somewhat irrelevant whether it lifts right now. Yeah. And so if you are lifting, could you attend with equal detail the putting of the foot down so that you never fall, you never plop or drop the weight of the foot to the floor? Because if you quickly drop the foot, then it's like you have to regenerate the whole organization. So instead, place your foot on the floor with the attitude that in the very next moment, you could pick it up again. So you lift your foot a little bit and you place it down. And as soon as the foot touches the floor, be prepared to lift it again so that you have no sense that your foot is going to fall. You have this very clear support within you for lifting the foot again. So that the next time you lift the foot, you have the sense that it becomes more integrated and lighter. That's right. So sensing for yourself, what little experiments could you make in order to make your leg lighter? If the entire task was for the next 40 minutes to do nothing but to make it so that your leg was lighter, how would you go about it? Where in yourself would you begin to include in the movement that's not participating yet? Okay, leave that for a moment. Lengthen your legs again. This is a profoundly simple way to start the lesson. This idea of lifting some part of ourselves in a way that's not an imposition on ourselves, but just a way to open to curiosity. All right, so you can keep actually, no, bend your knees and stand your feet again. And come back to that image that you're a baby lying on the floor. And I'd like you to just think about the possibility of lifting your head without actually enacting that. Could you let yourself linger in the sensory soup of, okay, here you are on your back, connected to the floor, and you start to think about gradually, slightly lightening, or maybe lifting your head and then putting it back down. And so you can unweight the head until you feel that there's some effort, until you feel that there is weight. So you can really listen to that sensory feedback of how heavy your head feels. And do this very, quietly, kindly. So you might try unweighting the head, and then you bring it back to the ground, and you may take a breath or 2 breaths and just really let the weight settle for a moment before you try that movement again. But again, you're a baby, you don't have a lot of willpower, you wouldn't tire yourself out, you wouldn't make yourself comfortable. Uncomfortable, that is. And if it feels like you're curious, you can try to pick up the whole head, but you can also just keep playing with feeling a lessening of pressure from the floor. And after each attempt to lift, you let the efforts go completely and rest like a baby would want to. And when you start to unweight the head, feel that cascade of coordination through the rest of you. So don't let it interrupt your breathing. If you are feeling that you're holding your breath, then you're doing too much. And you start to listen. When you begin to unweight your head, when the head starts to become a little lighter, does the rest of you change in the way it engages with the floor? And how so? Do you lift the head straight up, or do you start to bring the chin a little bit towards the chest as you lift? Do you feel any change in the lower back when you think of lifting the head? And then get a little curious about one of your feet. So as you start to lift your head, decline the chin a little bit and look as if you're looking towards one foot. And then you put it back down because you're immediately tired as the baby. And you can start to think of how you as the baby are actually using the floor to move. You sense of how when you lighten your head, that something else engages or participates backward with the floor. So the narrative of your body changes against the floor. It continues to change as you lift and as you gradually put the head down. And you can listen to the flow of information. Where is it that you notice it? Is it something happening in your chest? Is there something about your lower back? Okay, rest, let that go. Keep your knees bent and your feet standing. As we continue this, could you think of increasing the pleasure of this investigation? So interlace your fingers now behind the head. So you're holding the back of your head in your hands. If it feels nicer for you, you may go a little bit lower on your skull. Let the elbows move a little bit outward towards the floor. And then gradually just point the elbows a little bit more towards the ceiling, and then let them widen towards the floor, just to feel your wrists fold, feel your shoulder blades change in their relationship with the ground as you widen and narrow your elbows. And now, as a part of lifting your elbows towards the ceiling, could you also gradually lighten and maybe lift your head? So you point your elbows a little towards your ceiling and you begin to lift your head with the support of the hands, and then you slowly lower that back down. And it's the same game we were playing with the feet. Could you lift the head as if you're looking to feel that each movement could be lighter than the last? So that means that it's an inquiry that moves you away from just attending to the weight of the head and trying harder to lift your head. And you feel, how do you interact with the ground between your shoulder blades? How do the middle or lower ribs interact with the ground when you lift the head? Doing it slow enough that you go on breathing throughout it. Tracking the pressure of your ribs on the ground as the head comes away from the floor. And as you lift the head, could you let the lower back actually do the movement of lifting the head? What would that mean? That's right. And you don't lift the head at any rate that tires you out. So you can pause between movements long enough that you really feel like you're somewhat refreshed. And then you want to move because you're fresh to move the next time you attempt to lift the head. Okay, let that go for a moment. Simply put your head down, lengthen your legs, lengthen your arms. As you come to rest, just confirm with yourself that you're exploring very kindly, like a baby would, with some kind of lack of ambition, but a very wide, open sense of discovery. Because we're going to go further into some variations that on the surface might seem a little bit more athletic or almost like exercise, but I'd like you to really continue with this quiet sensitivity so that your game is about responding to the changing relationship to the floor. All right, so again, bend your knees and stand your feet. Interlace your fingers behind the head so you're holding the head. And as you float your elbows into the air, begin to lighten or float your head into the air and feel the connections down into yourself. And then you lower the head and you think to yourself, which foot, which leg seems lighter in relationship with this movement? So the knees are bent, the feet are standing, and you float your elbows and you float your head up. And the question is simply, which leg is lighter? And when you have that answer, would you begin to ever so slightly lighten the foot at the same time that you lighten the head? And so that's right. And then you control the descent of your head and your foot. You don't drop them. And there's not a big amount of twisting here. So perhaps you're lightening your left foot and you're bringing your left knee a little towards you. There's a sense of directing your left knee towards your left elbow, not both elbows to the knee. And so if you're lifting your right knee, your right foot, then you're directing your right knee and your right elbow a little towards each other. And the head and the foot lift simultaneously. And you control the descent and they touch the ground simultaneously. You're always breathing. And then spreading your attention to the interaction of your ribs and your back. Great. Let it go. Lengthen your legs. Take your arms down. Enjoy the support of the floor. Noticing again, has the connection of yourself to the ground changed? Is it evolving? And bend both knees, stay on the feet. You're going to use the same leg you were just using. So whatever foot you were lifting, could you think of lifting that foot, bringing that knee towards your chest, and of taking both hands to grasp behind this leg that you've been working with? And so you can watch for yourself how you form that intention. It's not just to do it, but actually watching how you start to do it. Watch the way that you start to lift this foot from the floor, what happens with your pelvis, and the way that you bring your hands behind that leg. You might start to interlace your fingers behind the leg, somewhere the back of the leg, maybe near the knee. And then you bring the foot down and release the hands. So you listen to the way all of yourself engages, the way that maybe your head rolls a little bit. There's this kind of profound choreography that's happening that you can start to notice, this cascade of events that takes place in order for the whole movement to happen. Great. And now just let that go. Keep your knees bent and interlace your fingers in the non-habitual way. So this is other thumb is in top, might feel a little funny, and bring your hands behind your head. And stay with this same leg for a moment. Could you lift this foot, lift this knee, and lift your head at the same time and feel the weight of that? Feel how heavy this leg feels, and then bring that foot down. And then try the other leg so that you can compare. Did that first leg, is there something we did that organized you to make it a little lighter? You can compare again, but eventually come to this second side. And just a few times, lightening the head along with the second foot. And it's like you ask the floor, you feel what moves backward into the floor to make the head and the foot light. Each time you do it, it could be lighter and lighter for yourself. And of course the muscles are working. Of course you're pressing the ground somewhere. But it's even more rich than that. Great. And then pause, bring your foot down, release your hands from behind your head, and begin to lift the same leg and watch as you start to bring your hands behind it, as if to interlace your hands behind that thigh. So you bring the leg towards you and you start to interlace the hands behind that thigh. Great. And then could you do this going from one leg to the other? So you lift one foot and you start to interlace your hands behind that leg, not in a hurry, but to actually be in this moment of connection with yourself and connection to the ground. So each time that you start to unweight your foot, connection with your ground changes. You can watch the interlacing of the hands, how the hands begin to form that intention to interlace, how the hands know the space behind your leg. And then whichever leg is starting to feel more clear to you, maybe the foot is lighter, Or maybe when you lift the leg, the movement feels like it has more grace or more ease to you. Could you interlace your fingers behind this leg and keep them there? And start to draw the knee a little bit towards you and away from you a couple times. So your hands are interlaced behind the leg. So not at the top of the shin, but actually behind your thigh, maybe close to your knee pit. And you draw the knee a little towards you and away from you so that you feel this very simple way that you change your relationship with the floor when the knee comes a little towards you and away from you. And as you start to draw the knee towards yourself, could you begin to lengthen the leg as if to lengthen the sole of the foot towards the ceiling? As your foot starts to come towards the ceiling, it starts to change your relationship with the floor. So you listen to that change. And as you start to lengthen the leg, you start to slide your hands on the back of the legs towards the calf. So as you lengthen your leg towards the ceiling, begin to slide your hands on your leg as if to reach towards your calf. And then you bend the knee and you slide the hands back down. So you make this whole movement of drawing your leg towards you, lengthening the leg towards the ceiling, sliding the hands towards the foot, and then bending the knee, sliding the hands back down. And could you continue doing that, keeping one hand behind the leg and bring the other hand behind the head? So that as one hand slides on the leg towards the calf, the other hand helps lift the head towards the foot. And so you explore this lifting of the head, which gives you a different kind of purchase of your ribs relative to the floor. You're not forcing anything. You feel, how do the ribs engage with the floor as the head lifts, as the leg lengthens? And you can even think of your heel reaching a little bit, the back of your heel. Yeah. Try changing which hand is behind your head. So other hand behind your head, other hand behind your leg. And the moment that you start to bring your knee a little towards you, you begin to lift your head and lengthen your leg. And you feel, where do you spread your contact with the floor? So can you make this whole movement about paying attention to the contact with the floor? Your ribs, your lower back, how your spine engages with the floor so that you can lift your head. There's a subtle way that your spine starts to become like a bow. The tip of your tail and the tip of your head lift to create this bow shape. Great. Let it go. When you're ready, lengthen your legs, bring your arms down. And observe your sense of being connected with the floor and how that's changing. Notice if there's a different sense of how your back, the right side of your spine, meets the floor compared to the left side of your spine. And bend your knees and stand your feet and stay working with the same leg you were working with. And return to the simple movement of unweighting your foot and lifting your leg to bring your knee a little towards your chest. And just observe for yourself if it's not somehow a little bit lighter or more simple to lift this leg. If the connection of your leg to your torso has some different clarity. Great. And then bring both hands behind this leg, this same leg, holding close to the knee pit, right, on the thigh near the knee, behind the leg, and begin to roll in the direction of the leg that you're holding. So if you're holding your right leg, you begin to roll to the right. Whichever leg you're holding, you begin to roll to that side. And as you roll, you have a sense that you're bringing your knee a little towards your chest. You're bringing your head a little bit towards your knee. Yeah, your other foot, keep it on the ground for right now. And so as you roll to the side of the leg you're holding, you see, can you continue to roll yourself further and further to the side, not by falling. So you find a way where your whole self, you find a counterbalance throughout yourself. And the moment that you start to roll yourself to the side, and maybe you actually come to your side, rolling all the way to the side. If you come all the way to your side, could you start to begin to lengthen the leg that you're holding? And then you come back onto your back. So the moment that you roll yourself to the side, you begin to lengthen that leg. And the moment that your leg is longest, you find whether or not you might be able to sit up. So just let that be in the image of the movement now. I'm not saying sit up. You might find yourself sitting, right? So you're holding this leg, you bring it towards you, you're rolling to that side. And as you come to your side, you begin to lengthen and kind of reach through that heel. And it might start to bring you to sit. You keep your hands behind the leg. You think of sitting up over that leg the moment that you've lengthened your leg to the longest point. That's right. There's no sense of pulling the leg towards you. If you end up finding yourself in sitting, just reverse it, roll back down. Your leg provides you with that balance, that reach. So as you roll to your side, you start to lengthen that leg as if to come up to sit. And I'll give you a little clue of what can make this easier. It's your other leg. What's your other leg doing? Could you actually start to lengthen that other leg? Reach through that other heel, almost if somebody had that foot, that other foot, and they keep it on the floor, but they start to pull that foot a little bit. Would that help you come up to sit? So you start to find how to balance and counterbalance yourself so that that reaching feet provides you with the strength to come up to sit. You sit up the moment your leg is long and you roll back to your side and you're still lengthening that leg. Karen, keep your knee bent and roll to your side with your knee bent. This might help others too. So you roll to your side with your knee bent. Once you're lying on your side, you feel like I'm on my side now. Then start to lengthen that leg and begin to lengthen the other leg too. And there's a kind of rolling over your shoulder, your arm, your elbow. How can your elbow help you to come up to sit? Beautiful. Yeah. You might not get to sit, and that's fine. You're working it out. And then you reverse and come back down. That's right. Whatever you're playing with right now, can you keep with that quality of a baby? Can you bring some almost a lightness, a lightheartedness to it? So it is not about the outcome. It's really about the investigation here. Great. Okay, leave this, pause, come to your back. Just observe all the elements of your experiencing, what you're thinking about, your sensing, your feeling. All right, so roll to your side and come up to sit. So everybody come up to sit. And you'll sit with your legs long. Your legs can be about as wide as your pelvis. And interlace your fingers behind the leg you were just exploring. So behind the knee. And start to draw this knee towards your chest. So your foot will slide on the floor and you start to bring that knee towards your chest. And of course, you can come towards the knee as well. And then you slide it away and lengthen the back of the heel on the floor. You can think of your heel reaching a little farther than your toes. So each time you slide your knee towards your chest, and then every time you slide your heel away from you, could you slide it a little bit further from your other leg? A few degrees. So you bring your knee towards you, the heel slides on the floor towards your sitting bone, and then you lengthen that leg, the back of the heel slides on the floor, but you lengthen the leg a few degrees farther from your other leg. So each time you lengthen the leg, it ends up being a little farther from the other. And you lengthen that leg far enough from the other leg until you could touch your elbow to the floor. So if it's your right leg that you're holding, it would be your right elbow. And you play with this idea of being able to tuck your forearm or your elbow to the floor, somewhere very close to your leg. So that could be a point of purchase. And you feel maybe you just kiss the floor with your elbow and then you come back up to sit. So trying that a few times so that you can quietly touch the floor and then make a movement to come back up to sit. And as you get to that place where you start to lean or put a little bit of weight on the elbow, could you find that your other leg, the one you're not holding, that it also reaches a little bit? So it starts to become a counterbalance so that you could perhaps roll to your side slowly through this elbow onto that shoulder, and your other leg is a reaching counterbalance as you come back onto your back, holding behind the leg. So you keep holding your leg, and maybe you come onto your back with your knees bent. The other foot can stand. The knee you're holding, the leg you're holding can come towards your chest. And then you roll to the side of the leg that you're holding. You reverse what you just did. Lengthen the leg once you get to your side, lengthen both legs and see if you can come up to sit. And you may pause for a moment in sitting and explore a little bit in sitting what we just did. Or maybe the getting to the ground and coming back up to sit. Oh, maybe you've connected a dot now, and so you can play. The moment that you come onto your side, if you're rolling to your side from your back, you lengthen the leg. You feel like the heels reach. That's right. And so if you're starting to okay, I've got this, I kind of got this movement. Now, could you feel like there's never any moment where you're putting more weight into the floor with one part of yourself? This is a thing we'll play with, the distribution of effort. So maybe your elbow feels really heavy at some moment. Could you make it lighter by reaching through your legs? If you get frustrated, I ask you to pause and lie on your back. Let's all do that. Come onto your back. Rest from that. And you might just explore now the differences you experienced between the two sides. You've been engaged with this one side for a while. This one side has been supporting the action. Bend your knees and stand your feet. The same leg you've been working with. Could you lift that foot, bring that knee towards you, and just find out if there's not some way that your whole torso knows how to engage the floor so that your leg is more available to you to lift? Have you reached a different level of coordination so that the relationship of your distal limbs and your torso are somehow a little bit more integrated? If your leg feels lighter, you know that your leg did not lose pounds from it, right? That difference of the experience of your leg is from the reorganization of your whole self. Okay, so now place that foot down, lift your second leg, and interlace your fingers behind that leg, somewhere near your knee, the back of your knee. And just start to explore this movement. There might be a tendency to want to seek the outcome, to get somewhere. It's very inherent in the way we've been conditioned. So here we're thinking of the process of exploration, to be in the curiosity of the moment. So we began by sliding our hands up the leg as it lengthened. You could play with that. Maybe you're already rolling to your side. Find something that intrigues you, some element of the movement. It might be something that you just very clearly remember from the first side. Whatever you're doing, though, can you listen to how your relationship with the floor changes? Listen where you get heavier, how you can engage with the floor. Maybe it's the way your head rolls. Maybe it's how your eyes are engaged with this movement. So whatever you're playing with, explore it and really watch it. Listen to the way that you put together an intention to move, and you spread that intention through the whole of yourself to carry out some action. Maybe you're still lengthening the leg, and that's really intriguing for you. Maybe you're starting to roll through this bigger movement. But whatever you're doing, finding the support for yourself, the balance and the counterbalance. That's right. And keep referring to the elegance, the ease, the sense of ease that you have. Follow the ease, because there are moments in this bigger swooping rolling movement that might not feel so easy. So how do you pass the ease through the whole of yourself? Great. Whatever you're working with, could you let it go and come up to sit? Beautiful, everyone. Have your legs long. Interlace your fingers behind this second leg that you've been working with. And then notice where you're looking. Are you looking down at the leg? Are you looking forward? Just notice. Sense your breathing as you're in sitting. And very slowly start to draw this knee towards you so you feel the back of the heel sliding on the floor. And then as you lengthen the leg, as you slide the heel away from you, you just move that leg a little bit further from the other leg, the leg that's just resting on the floor. And you can feel this sense of a little bit of a reach through the heel. And as the leg that you're holding gets a little bit wider, maybe about 45 degrees from the other leg, maybe a little wider than that, you start to feel whether or not you could arc your torso in the direction. So if it's your right leg, you arc your torso a little bit to the right to start to bring your right forearm, your right elbow. So it just very lightly touches the floor. Maybe the elbow touches the floor near your pelvis, right near the outside of the pelvis. So you just graze the floor and then you come back up to sit. And you listen for how could you do that with this sense of ease, elegance, so that the movement itself feels aesthetically pleasing to you. Maybe that has to do with how you're breathing. That's right. Good. The chest softens. And the moment that your elbow reaches the floor, you lengthen through your legs even more, especially that leg that you're not holding. So there's this way of interacting with the floor so that when your elbow starts to come to the floor, maybe you continue to roll more onto your torso, onto your side, but you feel, could you counterbalance with that other leg so that you have no sense of the breathing stopping or that you plop to the floor? That's right. And you may end up on your side and roll onto your back. And then from your back, holding this leg, rolling to your side. And feeling how the pressure on the floor, could it stay somewhat proportional throughout yourself? Those moments where you sense you're holding your breath, those are very interesting moments to listen to. Great. Let it go. Come to lie on your back. And just sense again for yourself the way that the floor, your torso, your legs settle, how you settle. Roll your head a little bit to one side and the other. Great. Now bend your knees and stand your feet. Interlace your fingers behind your head. And listen here first. You'll simultaneously lift your head and lift your feet as if to bring your elbows to your knees and your knees to your elbows. And so you can play there. And again, something resembling exercise, right? But we're listening in a very different way. You lower your head and your feet down quietly, simultaneously. And then you feel, how do you organize the middle of yourself so that the feet and the head are almost weightless as they lift? This doesn't mean that you're not working. There is effort. And then find a place where you could keep your feet off the floor. You could keep your head lifted. And imagine that you have a stick between your right elbow and your right knee and your left elbow and your left knee. So you keep that distance between your elbows and your knees. You keep that fixed. Your knees are, somewhat wide. And like this, kind of curled like this, could you start to roll? How slowly could you roll to your right? Could you do it without falling? If you're rolling to your right, your left leg stays wide, so it becomes that counterbalance. Yeah, your feet never come to the floor, and then you roll back onto your back. You maintain that fixed distance between your right elbow and your right knee and your left elbow and your left knee, and you roll to the side as slow as you can. Could you roll and just hover yourself an inch from the floor so you don't actually touch the floor? How would you find the counterbalance within yourself to do that? That's right. You may play with your knees coming a little bit closer towards you. Some of you, that may be helpful. So your knees may be a little closer to your elbows. Great. And now just try it quickly. Just let go of this idea of slow control and just roll right and left. And let it be a little bit more childlike. Feel how you interact with the floor. Can it still be smooth if it's quicker without interrupting your breath? Great. All right. Let it be. Lengthen everything long. Feel yourself long. Notice how your senses are open to the environment. Listen to your breath as it comes and goes. Notice now how your ribs seem to participate with the floor. And as you just rest here on your back, can you imagine, with these principles in mind, what if the next movement you do is easier, is lighter than the last? If that would be the guiding principle and all else that you do is an improvisation, as if you could take this into the rest of your life when you're doing a simple task. A little bit of housework, like maybe loading the dishwasher, folding the laundry, that what if the next movement has less effort? If that was the game, what kind of support can you find? So take a moment to bend your knees and stand your feet. And roll to your side, and when you're ready, come up to stand. So you come up to stand, lifting yourself from the floor to stand. And just feeling in standing, what did you create in yourself? Feel how you're lifted by your bones. Sense what is the outcome of all this folding, right? We did a lot of folding. How do you stand? Are you folded or are you unfolded? How does your back support you? Great. And you can walk around a bit. Sensing how your limbs connect to your torso. What kind of integration you feel of your legs to your torso. And maybe also just what's the sense of connection to yourself, just to your whole self. Kind of composure that might be valuable to bring into a relationship or something else that you're doing this evening. All right, so we started our exploration really subtle. The lesson ended with some movements that were a little bit more big and broad. We'll kind of unfold things like that over the next few months. So there'll be kind of a range of what we're exploring. Thanks everybody for joining tonight. I will leave the meeting up for some conversation. If you have anything you want to share, I'd love to entertain that. And all right, so anybody have a reflection or a moment in the lesson that stood out to them or was a surprise to them, maybe a challenge, particular sensation? Oh yeah, Judy.
Hi. I had two thoughts on this. One's a question. It was work, even though at the beginning it was easier. Toward the end, I felt like I had to do more effort to get anywhere near. But does this all, even though we're doing the efforts, does this make you stronger, which is part of the title of the workshop? Does doing this, you're not going to the gym, you're not lifting weights, but does this kind of thing make you stronger, even though just trying to do it effortlessly?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So there's a difference in what we're practicing than going to the gym and perhaps using resistance with weights or with the amount of time that you have under tension, right? The amount of miles you go. Those things are amazing and good, and I advocate for them. So oftentimes when we are doing something, even just throughout our day, and we feel something very effortful, it's because of the way that we're organized and we're feeling the sheer force. So we're not feeling resistance because we're lifting something that's really heavy. So that's why I called this the artistry of fluid strength, right? We are learning how to self-organize so that when you do go do some athletic endeavor, you do go ride your bike, you do go lift your weights, you have a better organization so that you perhaps don't injure yourself, or that activity starts to feel easier. So I can't really answer the question of will it make you stronger? I do believe that it will make you better organized and that you will feel more powerful. Yeah. Does that make sense? Anybody have a question about that?
Toward the end of the lesson, I did find, even though you're not supposed to go to a goal, I can't get anywhere near it unless I put more effort. And I was disappointed because the whole time we were using less and less effort. And toward the end, I felt I had to use more or I couldn't do what you said.
Yeah, and so it's not that we're using zero effort. We're never using zero effort, right? And the movement of the lesson got harder as the lesson went on. So there was a different kind of effort that was needed. Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Judy. Shulamit, yes.
When we started out, it seemed almost impossible to lift my foot. It was remarkable. And I could rotate it or I could lift my toes, but to lift my foot was, it was magnetized to the floor. And as I paid attention and I recruited less of my back and my ribs and my hips, and I just kept my torso relaxed against the floor, then I could lift my foot without struggle. And it was a letting go of everything else helping that made the movement so much more natural. And then I was able to use that information when I shifted my attention to the other foot, so that it was like real information that could be applied, and that I could think about all the future activities in that way of not recruiting all the other parts of my body to engage if I was focusing in one place. And so it was an exploration that led to learning. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Shulamit. Yeah. Yeah, it's a balance of what do we let go of? What can we let go of? Where are we working too hard? And sometimes we do have to recruit other parts of ourselves, and that makes things easier. So yeah, great. Thanks, Shulamit.
It was how to recruit them.
Right.
That they need to stop trying so hard and then pay attention to where they need to be grounded.
Great. Wonderful clarification. I love that. Thank you. Any other thoughts?
I felt similar to what you did, Shulamit, that I felt amazed how light my legs were towards the end, where they felt, I loved your word magnetized, but I was wishing, Sarah, because my head felt so heavy when we did it without our hands. The first time I thought, oh my gosh. And I was kind of wishing we were going to see if our head felt a lot lighter. I should have just tried that on my own. But I mean, it felt lighter with my hands, but I was wondering if it would be lighter. I think when we get off, I'm going to see if it feels lighter. When I just lifted
do a little bit of the movement and then see if it feels lighter. That definitely could have been a moment in the lesson, but I was already going over my time. So yeah, but I'm glad that you had that curiosity, and you can always insert that on your own in the lesson. Yeah.
And yeah. I found thank you for correcting me, the time when I was probably doing it. Like when you said sit up, I thought, I have no clue what you mean right there. It felt really unnatural. So I really liked it when we broke that down, and it felt sort of graceful towards the end when we gradually moved our leg out. And I have the funnest little design on my carpet behind me from my foot doing that.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
You made a little snow angel with your on the carpet. Great.
And that was another surprise of how familiar things became unfamiliar. Mm-hmm. And how the movements and the perceptions are constantly changing.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah, Hank. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this lesson, and for me, it's the relationship between effort and ease, and how compulsively I feel like I have to work a little harder or stretch a little bit more, or push into it. So it was nice how much you slowed things down and invited the exploration and the playfulness to try to subvert me from being goal-oriented.
Great. Yeah. When we get to that place, when we're wanting to get to an outcome, it really does keep us from participating in the experience, right? I was mentioning at the beginning of the lesson with perhaps the asymmetry that you felt in your breathing on one side to the other. And that instead of trying to make it the same, just listen to it, just be with, oh, whoa, can I feel that? Is that possible to feel? So hopefully, yes, that the goal, or there was no goal. Hopefully there was no goal, or the goal was to just keep exploring and being curious. Yeah. Thanks, Hank. It was nice to have you here.
I would just add one little postscript in that, the effort and the ease, you're being compared to Moshe. So doing AY a day this morning, they're doing the Esalen training. And it was what I don't know what the technical name is, but it's what I would call the foot to the head. Mm-hmm. And very quickly, he takes the elbow to the floor in front of the knee and into rolling. And there's no way in hell that I could do that, but I'm, trying to to keep up with the lesson and force my way through, which was not pleasant and very challenging. And so your approach was much more satisfying and encouraging. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Hank. Thank you. All right. Thanks, everyone. If you have any other questions, let me know. All right. Bye-bye.